Hi, my name's Amanda and I'm a pharmacist. This is quiz number 1 for my top 200 drugs flashcards. And if you find this video useful, please press the like button and subscribe to my channel and share it with others who may find it helpful too. Thanks, I really appreciate it. Number 1. Atorvastatin is a medication for A. Blood pressure, B. Osteoporosis, C. Cholesterol, or D. Infection. The answer is C, cholesterol. You can see atorvastatin ends with the suffix statin. We know the statins are medications for cholesterol. Number 2. Synthroid is a brand name drug for A. Sulfamethoxazole, B. Levothyroxine, C. Atomoxetine, or D. Risperidone. The answer is B, levothyroxine. Synthroid is a brand name for levothyroxine. So sulfamethoxazole, that is part of the generic name of Bactrim. Atomoxetine, that's the generic for Strattera. And risperidone is the generic for Risperdal. Number 3, true or false? Lysenapril is an ARB for high blood pressure. The answer is B, false. Lysenapril is an ACE inhibitor for high blood pressure. And you can see that it ends with the suffix pril, which is what is common for the ACE inhibitors. Number 4, Glucophage is a brand name drug for A. Glipizide, B. Pioglitazone, C. Metoprolol, or D. Metformin. The answer is D, metformin. That's the generic name for glucophage. Glipizide is the generic for glucotrol. Pioglitazone is the generic for Actose. Metoprolol is the generic for Lopressor. Number 5. Amlodipine is a or an blank blocker for high blood pressure. A. Calcium channel, B. Dopamine, C. Beta, or D. Alpha. And the answer is A. Amlodipine is a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure. And the brand name of amlodipine is Norvasc. Number 6. Metoprolol is a generic name for A. Lopressor, B. Tenormin, C. Toprol XL, or D. Both A and C. And the answer is D, both A and C. Metoprolol is a generic name for Lopressor and Toprol XL. Tenormin is the brand name for atenolol. Number 7. Albuterol is a beta-2 agonist for A. Sleep, B. Asthma, C. Heart failure, or D. Infection. The answer is B. Asthma. Albuterol is a beta-2 agonist inhaled bronchodilator. Number 8. Which of the following is not a proton pump inhibitor? A. Prilosec, B. Prevacid, C. Protonix, or D. Pepcid? The answer is D. Pepcid. Pepcid's generic name is famotidine, and it's an H2 blocker. The other 3 are PPIs. You can see they end with the suffix prazole. So Prilosec, its generic is omeprazole. Prevacid's generic is lansoprazole. And Protonix's generic is pantoprazole. Number 9. True or false? Losartan is the generic name for Cozar. A. True, or B. False? The answer is A. True. Losartan is indeed the generic name for Cozar, and it is an ARB or angiotensin receptor blocker for high blood pressure. Number 10. The brand name for simvastatin is A. Crestor, B. Sinemet, C. Lipitor, or D. Zocor. And the answer is D. Zocor. That is the brand name for simvastatin. Crestor is the brand name for rosuvastatin. Sinemet is the brand name for carbidopa with levodopa. That's actually a medication for Parkinson's disease, not even a cholesterol medication. Lipitor is the brand name for atorvastatin. which is also a cholesterol medication. Number 11. Neurontin is the brand name for A. Lamotrigine, B. Diazepam, C. Gabapentin, or D. Glimepiride. And the answer is C. Gabapentin is the generic name of Neurontin. For lamotrigine, it's the generic name for Lamictal. Diazepam was the generic for Valium, and Glimepiride is the generic name for Amaryl. Number 12. Match the following drug with its brand name and schedule. And the drug is hydrocodone with APAP. A. Norco, Schedule 2. B. Norco, Schedule 3. C. Percocet, Schedule 2. Or D. Percocet, Schedule 3. And the answer is A. Norco, Schedule 2. Hydrocodone with APAP. APAP's an abbreviation for acetaminophen. That is Norco, and that is a DEA Schedule 2 drug. And I have a note here if you'll remember, Schedule 2s are generally for the pain and ADHD. Schedule 3s are generally for testosterone, the anabolic steroids, and for products with not greater than 90 milligrams of codeine. So for Percocet, it's also a Schedule 2. It's oxycodone with acetaminophen. Number 13. Hydrochlorothiazide is a or an blank for high blood pressure. A. Beta blocker, B. Diuretic, C. Steroid, or D. ACE inhibitor. And the answer is B. Diuretic. And the brand name of hydrochlorothiazide is Microzide. Number 14. Sertraline is the blank name of Zoloft, a blank antidepressant. A. Trade SSRI, B. Generic SSRI, C. Brand SSRI, or D. Generic and tricyclic. And the answer is B. Sertraline is the generic name of Zoloft, a SSRI antidepressant. Number 15. The brand name of Montelukast is A. Claritin, B. Mobic, C. Strattera, or D. Singulair. And the answer is D. Singulair. That is the brand name for Montelukast. Claritin is the brand name for loratadine. Mobic is the brand name for meloxicam. And Strattera is the brand name for atomoxetine. Number 16. The generic name of Flonase is A. Fluticasone, B. Salmeterol, C. Fluoxetine, or D. Cetirazine. And the answer is A. Fluticasone. Fluticasone is the generic name of Flonase. For Salmeterol, the generic name is Servent. That's a long-acting beta-2 bronchodilator inhaler. For fluoxetine, the brand name is Prozac. That is a SSRI antidepressant. And for Cetirazine, the brand name is Zyrtec. That's an antihistamine for allergies. Number 17. Amoxicillin is a blank antibiotic. A. Fluoroquinolone, B. Cephalosporin, C. Penicillin, or D. Lincosamide. And the answer is C. Penicillin. Amoxicillin is a penicillin antibiotic, and the brand name is Amoxil. Number 18. What is the generic name for Lasix? A. HCTZ, B. Furosemide, C. Ferrous sulfate, or D. Lysenapril. And the answer is B. Furosemide. That is the generic name for Lasix. HCTZ, that's an abbreviation for hydrochlorothiazide. That is a generic name for Microzide. Ferrous sulfate, that's a generic name for Fiasol. That's an iron supplement. And Lysenapril is the generic name for Prenavil or Zestaril. That's an ACE inhibitor for high blood pressure. Number 19, true or false? Lansoprazole is the generic name for Protonix. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Pantoprazole is the generic name for Protonix. Lansoprazole is the generic name for Prevacid. Number 20. Which of the following are indications for acetaminophen? A, itching, B, fever, C, pain, or D, both B and C? And the answer is D, both B and C. Acetaminophen is for both fever and pain. Number 21. The brand name for prednisone is A, Desaril, B, Deltazone, C, Aldactone, or D, Prevacid? The answer is B, Deltazone. Deltazone is the brand name for prednisone. Desaril is the brand name for trazodone, that's an antidepressant. Aldactone is the brand name for spironolactone, which is a diuretic. And Prevacid is the brand name for lansoprazole, which is a PPI medication for heartburn and GERD. Number 22. The generic name for Celexa is A, S-citalopram, B, citalopram, C, esomeprazole, or D, omeprazole? And the answer is B. Citalopram is the generic name of Celexa. S-citalopram is the generic for Lexapro. Both of these are SSRI antidepressants. Esomeprazole is the generic name for Nexium, and omeprazole is the generic name for Prilosec. And both of those are PPI medications for GERD. Number 23, true or false? Fluoxetine is the generic name for Prozac. A, true, or B, false? The answer is A, true. Fluoxetine is indeed the generic name for Prozac, which is an SSRI antidepressant. Number 24, true or false? Adderall is a non-scheduled drug for ADHD. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Adderall is a DEA Schedule II. The non-scheduled drugs for ADHD include Strattera, Intuniv, and Capve. Number 25. The brand name for Tramadol is A, Tradjenta, B, Ultracet, C, Ultram, or D, Klonopin? And the answer is C, Ultram. That is the brand name for Tramadol. Tradjenta is the brand name for linagliptin, the medication for diabetes. Ultracet is the brand name for a medication with tramadol and acetaminophen. And Klonopin is the brand name for clonazepam, which is a benzodiazepine for anxiety. Number 26, true or false? Lantus is a long-acting oral diabetes medication. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Lantus is a long-acting insulin injection for diabetes. It's not an oral medication. Number 27. The brand name for bupropion is A, Wellbutrin, B, Buspar, C, Zyban, or D, both A and C? The answer is D, both A and C. The brand name for bupropion is both Wellbutrin and Zyban. Wellbutrin is the brand name for bupropion given for depression, and Zyban is the brand name of bupropion when it's prescribed for smoking cessation. Number 28. Ibuprofen is a or an blank for pain and inflammation. A, steroid, B, 5-HT agonist, C, NSAID, or D, antihistamine? And the answer is C. Ibuprofen is an NSAID for pain and inflammation. And NSAID stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. So a steroid, those are just for inflammation and allergic reactions. A 5-HT or serotonin agonist is for migraines, and an antihistamine is for allergies. Number 29. The generic name for Crestor is A. Pravastatin, B. Rosuvastatin, C. Atorvastatin, or D. Simvastatin. And the answer is B. Rosuvastatin is the generic name for Crestor. Pravastatin is the generic name for Pravachol. Atorvastatin is the generic name for Lipitor, and Simvastatin is the generic name for Zocor. Number 30. Pravachol is an oral medication for A. Diabetes, B. Constipation, C. Depression, or D. High cholesterol. And the answer is D. High cholesterol. The generic name for Pravachol is Pravastatin, and you'll see the ending suffix is statin, and that's in the class of HMG-CoA reductase inhibitors, which are for high cholesterol. Number 31. The generic name for Desiril is A. Sertraline, B. Trazodone, C. Rizatriptan, or D. Loratadine. And the answer is B. Trazodone is the generic name for Desiril. Sertraline is the generic name for Zoloft, which is an SSRI antidepressant. Rizatriptan is the generic name for Maxalt, which is a 5-HT agonist for migraines. And Loratadine is the generic name for Claritin, which is a non-sedating antihistamine. And Desiril is also a type of antidepressant. Number 32. True or false? Tamsulosin is a urinary selective alpha blocker for BPH. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is A. True. Tamsulosin is in fact a urinary selective alpha blocker for BPH, and its brand name is Flomax. Number 33. True or false? The brand name for Carvedilol is Proscar. A. True, or B. False? The answer is B. False. The brand name for Carvedilol is Coreg. Finasteride is the generic name for Proscar. Number 34. The generic name for Mobic is A. Ketorolac, B. Meloxicam, C. Montelukast, or D. Metolazone. And the answer is B. Meloxicam is the generic for Mobic, which is an NSAID for pain and inflammation. Ketorolac, the brand name is Toradol. It is a medication also, an NSAID for pain and inflammation. Montelukast, it is the generic name for Singulair, which is a leukotriene inhibitor for asthma and allergies. And Metolazone is the generic name for Xeroxilin, which is a diuretic. Number 35. The brand name for citalopram is A. Lexapro, B. Celexa, C. Lopressor, or D. both A and B. And the answer is B. Celexa. The brand name for citalopram is Celexa, and that is an SSRI antidepressant. Lexapro, it's the brand name for S-citalopram, which is also an SSRI antidepressant. Lopressor is the brand name for Metoprolol, which is a beta blocker for high blood pressure and irregular heartbeat. Number 36. Cymbalta is a SNRI blank. A. Anxiolytic, B. Antagonist, C. Antidepressant, or D. Antihistamine. And the answer is C. Cymbalta is an SNRI antidepressant. An SNRI, it stands for serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, and the generic name for Cymbalta is duloxetine. Number 37. True or false? The brand name of Xanax is alprazolam, and it's a DEA Schedule 5 drug. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is B. False. Xanax is alprazolam, but it's a DEA Schedule 4. And if you'll remember, the Schedule 4s are generally drugs for sleep and anxiety, and Schedule 5 are for conditions such as cough and diarrhea. So alprazolam is a DEA Schedule 4, as are all the other benzodiazepine drugs for anxiety or sleep. Number 38. K-Dur is a blank supplement. A. Sodium, B. Potassium, C. Magnesium, or D. Calcium. And the answer is B. Potassium. K-Dur is a potassium supplement. It's also known as potassium chloride or KCl, which is the chemical name for potassium chloride. And another brand name you may see for potassium supplements is Chlorcon. Number 39. The brand name for clopidogrel is A. Coumadin, B. Klonopin, C. Plavix, or D. Xarelto. And the answer is C. Plavix. The brand name for clopidogrel is Plavix, which is an antiplatelet blood thinner. Coumadin is the brand name for warfarin, which is a vitamin K antagonist blood thinner. Klonopin is the brand name for clonazepam, which is a benzodiazepine for anxiety. And Xarelto is brand name for rivaroxaban, which is a direct factor 10A inhibitor blood thinner. Number 40. Aspirin is A or an A. Antihistamine, B. Beta blocker, C. Diuretic, or D. Antiplatelet. And the answer is D. Antiplatelet. Aspirin is an antiplatelet. Helps prevent blood clots. The brand name for aspirin is Ecotrin. Number 41. True or false? The generic name for Zantac is alprazolam. A. True, or B. False? The answer is B. False. The generic name for Zantac is ranitidine. Alprazolam is the generic name for Xanax. So these medications do sound alike. Zantac is an H2 blocker for heartburn. Xanax, or alprazolam, is a benzodiazepine for anxiety. Number 42. The generic name for tenormin is A. Metoprolol, B. Atenolol, C. Carvedilol, or D. Nebivolol. And the answer is B. Atenolol. The generic name for tenormin is atenolol. Metoprolol is the generic name for Lopressor or Toprol XL. Carvedilol is the generic name for Coreg. And Nebivolol is the generic name for Bistolic. Those are all beta blockers that end with the LOL suffix. Number 43. Flexeril, or cyclobenzaprine, is A or an A. Pain reliever, B. Stimulant, C. Muscle relaxant, or D. Antibiotic. And the answer is C. Flexeril, generic name is cyclobenzaprine, is a muscle relaxant. Number 44. The brand name for glipizide is A. Glucotrol, B. Glucophage, C. Actose, or D. Januvia. And the answer is A. The brand name for glipizide is Glucotrol. Glucophage, the generic is metformin. Actose, the generic name is pioglitazone. And Januvia, the generic name is sitagliptin. So they're all medications for diabetes. Number 45. True or false? Methylphenidate is a CNS stimulant for ADHD. A. True, or B. False? The answer is A. True. Methylphenidate is indeed a central nervous system stimulant for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The brand name methylphenidate is Ritalin, and it's a DEA Schedule 2. Number 46. The generic name for Zithromax is A. Clarithromycin, B. Clindamycin, C. Erythromycin, or D. Azithromycin. And the answer is D. Azithromycin that's the generic name for Zithromax. Clarithromycin is the generic name for Biaxin. Clindamycin is the generic name for Cleocin. And erythromycin is the generic name for Emycin. And Biaxin, Emycin, and Zithromax are all macrolide antibiotics. Clindamycin is a lincosamide antibiotic. Number 47. What DEA schedule is Klonopin? Generic name clonazepam. A. Schedule 1, B. Schedule 2, C. Schedule 3, or D. Schedule 4? And the answer is D. Schedule 4. If you'll remember, Schedule 4s are generally for anxiety and sleep, and Klonopin is a benzodiazepine for anxiety. It's a DEA Schedule 4. Number 48. What DEA schedule are drug products containing oxycodone, such as roxicodone or OxyContin? A. Schedule 1, B. Schedule 2, C. Schedule 3, or D. Schedule 4? And the answer is B. Schedule 2. If you remember, Schedule 2 medications are generally for pain and ADHD, and both the oxycodone, the roxicodone, OxyContin, both have oxycodone in them, and they fall under the Schedule 2 category. Number 49. What is the brand name for allopurinol? A. Aldactone, B. Zyprexa, C. Xyloprim, or D. Ultoprev? The answer is C. Xyloprim. That's the brand name for allopurinol, which is a xanthine oxidase inhibitor for gout. Aldactone is the brand name for spironolactone, which is a diuretic for high blood pressure and heart failure. Zyprexa is the brand name for olanzapine, which is an antipsychotic medication. And Ultoprev is a brand name for lovastatin, which is a HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor for high cholesterol. Number 50. What is the generic name for Effexor? A. Venlafaxine, B. Duloxetine, C. Escitalopram, or D. Apixaban? And the answer is A. Venlafaxine. The generic name for Effexor is venlafaxine, and it is an SNRI antidepressant. Duloxetine is the generic name for Cymbalta, which is also an SNRI antidepressant. Escitalopram is the generic name for Lexapro, which is an SSRI antidepressant. And Apixaban is the generic name for Eliquis, which is a direct factor Xa inhibitor blood thinner. Number 51. Lysenapril HCTZ is a or an blank and blank combination for high blood pressure. A. ARB and diuretic, B. ACE inhibitor and diuretic, C. ACE inhibitor and beta blocker, or D. ARB and beta blocker? So which two medication classes are Lysenapril and HCTZ in? And the answer is B. ACE inhibitor and diuretic. Lysenapril is an ACE inhibitor. You can see the pril ending for the suffix. And HCTZ is a diuretic. Number 52. Coumadin is the brand name for A. Apixaban, B. Rivaroxaban, C. Clopidogrel, or D. Warfarin? And the answer is D. Warfarin. Coumadin is the brand name for Warfarin, which is a vitamin K antagonist blood thinner. Eliquis is the brand name for Apixaban, which is a direct factor Xa inhibitor blood thinner. Rivaroxaban is the generic name for Xarelto, which is also a direct factor Xa inhibitor blood thinner. And Clopidogrel is the generic name for Plavix, which is an antiplatelet. Number 53. Inderal, or propranolol, is a or an blank for high blood pressure. A. Alpha blocker, B. Beta blocker, C. Diuretic, or D. ACE inhibitor? And the answer is B, beta blocker. And you can know that by knowing the suffix of LOL is for beta blockers. Number 54, true or false? The brand name of losartan HCTZ is Cozar. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. The brand name of losartan HCTZ is Hyzar. Cozar is losartan only. Number 55. Cetirazine is the generic name for A, Zyrtec, B, Claritin, C, Zoloft, or D, Celexa. And the answer is A. Cetirazine is the generic name for Zyrtec. Claritin is brand name for loratadine, which both Claritin and Zyrtec are H1 antihistamines for allergies. Zoloft is the brand name for sertraline, and Celexa is the brand name for citalopram, and both of those are SSRI antidepressants. Number 56. Estrace and Clamera are brand names for A, estradiol, B, etonogestrel, C, progesterone, or D, norgestimate. And the answer is A, estradiol. Both Estrace and Clamera are brand names for estradiol, which is an estrogen hormone. The other three choices, etonogestrel, progesterone, and norgestimate, are all progesterone hormones. Number 57. True or false? Loestrin is a thyroid hormone medication. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Loestrin is an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination. Its generic name is ethinyl estradiol with norethindrone. So it is not a thyroid medication. Number 58. The brand name for lorazepam is A, Xanax, B, Valium, C, Ativan, or D, Klonopin. And the answer is C, Ativan. The brand name for lorazepam is Ativan. Xanax is the brand name for alprazolam, Valium is the brand name for diazepam, and Klonopin is the brand name for clonazepam. And all four of these medications are all benzodiazepines for anxiety. Number 59. The brand name for quetiapine is A, Zyprexa, B, Seroquel, C, Lexapro, or D, Cymbalta. And the answer is B, Seroquel. That's the brand name for quetiapine. Zyprexa is the brand name for olanzapine, and both of those, Seroquel and Zyprexa, are antipsychotic medications. Lexapro is the brand name for escitalopram, which is an SSRI antidepressant, and Cymbalta is the brand name for duloxetine, which is an SNRI antidepressant. Number 60. The brand name for Zolpidem is blank, and it's indicated for blank. A, Restoril, sleep. B, Ambien, sleep. C, Restoril, anxiety. Or D, Ambien, anxiety. And the answer is B. The brand name for Zolpidem is Ambien, and it's indicated for sleep. Restoril is temazepam, and it's also for sleep. Number 61. Ergocalciferol is a blank supplement. A, magnesium, B, calcium, C, vitamin D, or D, vitamin B12. And the answer is C, vitamin D. Ergocalciferol is a vitamin D supplement. It's actually vitamin D2. Number 62. Simbicort is the brand name for A, triamcinolone, B, salmeterol, C, budesonide with formoterol, or D, fluticasone with salmeterol. And the answer is C. Simbicort is the brand name for budesonide with formoterol. That's a steroid and beta-2 bronchodilator combination for asthma and COPD. Triamcinolone, that's a generic name for Asmacort, which is an inhaled steroid. Salmeterol is the generic name for Servent, which is a beta-2 bronchodilator inhalation. And fluticasone with salmeterol, that's the generic for Advair, which, like Simbicort, it's also a steroid and beta-2 bronchodilator inhaled product. Number 63, true or false? Aldactone is a potassium-sparing diuretic. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is A, true. Aldactone is in fact a potassium-sparing diuretic, and its generic name is spironolactone. Number 64. Zofran, or ondansetron, is a 5-HT3 antagonist used for A, headaches, B, nausea, C, depression, or D, sleep. And the answer is B, nausea. Number 65. Novolog is a blank insulin for diabetes. Its generic name is blank. A, long-acting insulin glargine. B, long-acting insulin aspart. C, rapid-acting insulin aspart. Or D, long-acting insulin detamir. And the answer is C, rapid-acting insulin aspart. Novolog is a rapid-acting insulin for diabetes. Its generic name is insulin aspart. Insulin glargine, which is Lantus or Basaglar, that is a long-acting insulin. And insulin detamir, which is Levemir, is also a long-acting insulin. Insulin aspart and Lispro are the two rapid-acting insulins. Number 66. True or false? Eliquis, or apixaban, is a direct factor Xa inhibitor blood thinner. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is A, true. Eliquis, which its generic name is apixaban, is a direct factor Xa inhibitor blood thinner. Number 67. The generic name for naproxen is A, naproxen, B, ibuprofen, C, nortriptyline, or D, meloxicam. The answer is A, naproxen. The generic name for naproxen is naproxen. Ibuprofen is the generic name for Motrin, nortriptyline is the generic name for Pamelor, and meloxicam is the generic name for Mobic. Naproxen, ibuprofen, and meloxicam are all NSAIDs for pain and inflammation. Nortriptyline is an antidepressant. Number 68. Lamotrigine is the generic name for A, Lamisil, B, Lopressor, C, Lamictal, or D, Lyrica. The answer is C, Lamictal. Lamotrigine is the generic name for Lamictal. Lamisil, the generic is a brand name for terbinafine, which is an antifungal. Lopressor is the brand name for Metoprolol, which is a beta blocker for high blood pressure and irregular heartbeat. And Lyrica is a medication for nerve pain. Generic of it is pregabalin. Number 69. Advair is a blank for asthma and COPD. A, steroid, B, steroid and bronchodilator, C, bronchodilator, or D, vasoconstrictor. And the answer is B, steroid and bronchodilator. Advair is both a steroid and bronchodilator for asthma and COPD. Its generic is fluticasone, which is the steroid part, and salmeterol, which is the bronchodilator part. Number 70. The generic name for Lyrica is A, pregabalin, B, gabapentin, C, oxcarbazepine, or D, paroxetine. And the answer is A, pregabalin. That's the generic for Lyrica, which is used for nerve pain. Gabapentin is the generic name for Neurontin, which is a medication for seizures and nerve pain. Oxcarbazepine is the generic name for Trileptal, which is also a medication for seizures. And paroxetine is the generic name for Paxil, which is an SSRI antidepressant. Number 71. The brand name for glimepiride is A. Glucotrol, B. Amaryl, C. Glucophage, or D. Tradjenta. And the answer is B. Amaryl. That's the brand name for glimepiride. Glucotrol is a brand name for glipizide. Glucophage is a brand name for metformin, and Tradjenta is the brand name for linagliptin, and all these medications are for diabetes. Number 72. The generic name for Voltaren is A. Ketorolac, B. Naproxen, C. Diclofenac, or D. Valacyclovir. And the answer is C. Diclofenac. Diclofenac is the generic name for Voltaren. Ketorolac is the generic name for Toradol. Naproxen is the generic name for Naprosyn, and all three of those are NSAIDs for pain and inflammation. And Valacyclovir is the generic name for Valtrex, which is an antiviral. Number 73. True or false? Tricor is a medication for high cholesterol and triglycerides. A. True, or B. False? The answer is A. True. Tricor is indeed a medication for high cholesterol and triglycerides. And the generic name for Tricor is fenofibrate. Number 74. True or false? Paxil, or paroxetine, is an SSRI antipsychotic. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is B. False. Paxil, which is paroxetine, is an SSRI antidepressant. Number 75. Clonidine is used for A. High blood pressure, B. ADHD, C. Vomiting, or D. Both A and B. And the answer is D. Both A and B. Clonidine is used for both high blood pressure and ADHD. Catapress is a brand name marketed for high blood pressure, and Capvay is the brand name marketed for ADHD. Number 76. The brand name for loratadine is A. Atarax, B. Catapress, C. Claritin, or D. Zyrtec. And the answer is C. Claritin. Claritin is the brand name for loratadine, which is a medication, an antihistamine for allergies. Atarax is the brand name for hydroxyzine, which is a medication used for itching associated with allergies and also anxiety. Catapress is the brand name for Clonidine, which is a medication for high blood pressure and also used in ADHD. And Zyrtec is the brand name for Cetirazine, which is also an antihistamine for allergies. Number 77. The generic name for the calcium channel blocker cardizem is A. Verapamil, B. Nifedipine, C. Amlodipine, or D. Diltiazem. And the answer is D. Diltiazem. That's a generic name for cardizem. Verapamil is a generic for Calin or Verilin. Nifedipine is a generic name for Procardia, and amlodipine is a generic name for Norvasc, and all four of those are calcium channel blockers. Number 78. Hydroxyzine is for A. Anxiety, B. Allergies, C. Depression, or D. Both A and B. And the answer is D. Both A and B. Hydroxyzine is used for both anxiety and allergies. And the brand names are Atarax and Vistaril. Number 79. True or false? Elavil, or amitriptyline, is a tricyclic antidepressant. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is A. True. Elavil, which the generic is amitriptyline, it is a tricyclic antidepressant. Number 80. The generic name for Vibramycin is A. Erythromycin, B. Doxycycline, C. Azithromycin, or D. Amoxicillin? And the answer is B. Doxycycline is a generic name for vabromycin. Erythromycin is a generic name for emycin. Azithromycin is a generic name for Zithromax, and amoxicillin is a generic name for Amoxil. These are all antibiotics. Number 81. The brand name for ethinyl estradiol norgestimate is A. Ovcon, B. Orthocycline, C. Nuvaring, or D. Prometrium? And the answer is B. Orthocycline. It's an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination of ethinyl estradiol and norgestimate. Ovcon is also an estrogen-progesterone combination. It's ethinyl estradiol and norethindrone. And Nuvaring is also an estrogen-progesterone combination of ethinyl estradiol and etonogestrel. Prometrium is just progesterone. Number 82. The generic name for Vyvanse is A. Dextroamphetamine, B. Dexmethylphenidate, C. Lisdexamphetamine, or D. Phentermine? And the answer is C. Lisdexamphetamine is the generic name for Vyvanse. Dextroamphetamine with amphetamine is the generic name for Adderall. Dexmethylphenidate is the generic for Focalin, and all these three are for ADHD. And Phentermine is the generic for Adipex, and that is a medication for weight loss. Number 83. Januvia, or sitagliptin, is a medication for A. Diabetes, B. Gout, C. High blood pressure, or D. Allergies? And the answer is A. Diabetes. Januvia is a medication for diabetes. Number 84. The generic name for Xalatan is A. Timolol, B. Latanoprost, C. Brimonidine, D. Propranolol? The answer is B. Latanoprost. That's the generic name for Xalatan. Timolol is a generic name for Timoptic. Brimonidine is a generic name for alpha-GAM-P. And those three are all medications for glaucoma. Propranolol is a generic name for Inderal, which is a beta blocker for high blood pressure and irregular heartbeat. Number 85. Keflex is a blank antibiotic. A. Penicillin, B. Macrolide, C. Cephalosporin, or D. Lincosamide? And the answer is C. Cephalosporin. The generic name is Cephalexin. So you can see how it's part of the cephalosporins with the prefix of ceph. Number 86. The generic name for Xanaflex, a muscle relaxant, is A. Cyclobenzaprine, B. Tizanidine, C. Oseltamivir, or D. Mirtazapine? And the answer is B. Tizanidine. That's the generic name for Xanaflex. Cyclobenzaprine is the generic for Flexeril, and it's also a muscle relaxant. Oseltamivir is the generic for Tamiflu, which is an antiviral. And mirtazapine is the generic name for Remeron, which is an antidepressant. Number 87. True or false? Finasteride is a medication for enlarged prostate symptoms and hair loss. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is A. True. Finasteride is a medication that's used for both enlarged prostate symptoms. This is with the brand name Proscar, and also for hair loss, and this is marketed under the brand name Propecia. Number 88. The generic name for Mevacor is A. Simvastatin, B. Lovastatin, C. Rosuvastatin, or D. Atorvastatin? And the answer is B. Lovastatin. This is the generic name for Mevacor. Simvastatin is Zocor, Rosuvastatin is Crestor, and Atorvastatin is Lipitor. All four medications for high cholesterol. Number 90. The brand name of topiramate is A. Topamax, B. Zovirax, C. Maxalt, or D. Spiriva. The answer is A. Topamax. That is the brand name of topiramate, which is a medication for seizures. Zovirax is the brand name of acyclovir, which is an antiviral. Maxalt is the brand name of rizatriptan, which is a serotonin agonist for migraines. And Spiriva is the brand name for tiotropium, which is a medication, inhaled bronchodilator medication. Number 91. What is the generic name for Humalog? A. Insulin aspart, B. Insulin glargine, C. Insulin lispro, or D. Insulin detamir. And the answer is C. Insulin lispro is the generic name for Humalog. Insulin aspart is the generic name for Novolog, and both of those two insulins, Novolog and Humalog, are the rapid-acting insulins. Insulin glargine is the generic name for Lantus, and insulin detamir is a generic name for Levemir, and those are both long-acting insulins. Number 91. The brand name of SMX/TMP is A. Omnicef, B. Bactrim, C. Cipro, or D. Dorix. And the answer is B. Bactrim. SMX/TMP, that's an abbreviation for sulfamethoxazole and trimethoprim, which is the generic name for Bactrim. Omnicef is the brand name for Ceftonir. Cipro is the brand name for ciprofloxacin, and Dorix is a brand name for doxycycline, and all four of those are antibiotics. Number 92. Buspirone is a medication for A. Allergies, B. Diabetes, C. Anxiety, or D. Swelling. And the answer is C. Anxiety. Buspirone is a medication for anxiety, and its brand name is Buspar. Number 93. The generic name for Tamiflu is A. Acyclovir, B. Valacyclovir, C. Tamsulosin, or D. Oseltamivir. And the answer is D. Oseltamivir. That's the generic name for Tamiflu, which is an antiviral for the flu virus, the influenza virus. Acyclovir is the generic name for Zovirax, and Valacyclovir is the generic name for Valvatrex, and those are both antiviral medications against the herpes virus. And Tamsulosin is the generic name for Flomax, which is a medication for symptoms of enlarged prostate. Number 94. Thiazole is a or an blank supplement. A. Vitamin B12, B. Iron, C. Magnesium, or D. Potassium. And the answer is B. Iron. Thiazole is an iron supplement. More specifically, it is ferrous sulfate, and the chemical formula is FeSO4. Number 95. The brand name of amoxicillin with clavulanic acid is A. Amoxil, B. Keflex, C. Augmentin, or D. Cleocin. The answer is C. Augmentin. That's the brand name of amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. Amoxil is the brand name for amoxicillin only. Keflex is the brand name for cephalexin, and Cleocin is the brand name for clindamycin. All four of those are antibiotics. Number 96. Diovan is a or an blank for high blood pressure. A. ACE inhibitor, B. Angiotensin receptor blocker, C. Calcium channel blocker, or D. Alpha blocker. And the answer is B. Diovan is an angiotensin receptor blocker, or ARB, it's often abbreviated, and it's for high blood pressure. Number 97. True or false? Levetiracetam is a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is B, false. Levetiracetam, its brand name is Keppra, is an anticonvulsant for seizures. Levofloxacin, brand name is Levaquin, is the fluoroquinolone antibiotic. Number 98, true or false? The brand name of hydroxyzine is Apresilene. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. The brand name of hydroxyzine is Atarax or Vistaril. The brand name of hydralazine is Apresilene. So you can see this is a very common look-alike, sound-alike drug that's only different by 3 letters. So hydroxyzine is Atarax or Vistaril. Hydralazine is Apresilene. Hydroxyzine is for allergies or anxiety, and hydralazine is for blood pressure. So 2 very different indications as well. Number 99. The brand name of mirtazapine is A, Mevacor, B, Procardia, C, Requip, or D, Remeron. The answer is D, Remeron. Its generic name is mirtazapine, which is an antidepressant. Mevacor is the brand name for Lovastatin, which is a medication for cholesterol. Procardia is the brand name for nifedipine, which is a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure. And Requip is the brand name of Ropinirole, which is a medication for Parkinson's disease and restless leg syndrome. Number 100. Xarelto is a or an blank blood thinner. A, vitamin K antagonist, B, antiplatelet, C, direct factor 10A inhibitor, or D, antithrombin. And the answer is C. Xarelto is a direct factor 10A inhibitor blood thinner, and its generic is rivaroxaban. And another direct factor 10A blood thinner is apixaban. The vitamin K antagonist blood thinner is warfarin. Antiplatelet blood thinner is clopidogrel and aspirin. And the antithrombin blood thinner is heparin. Number 101. The generic name for Abilify is A, pantoprazole, B, aripiprazole, C, fluconazole, or D, ropinirole. And the answer is A, aripiprazole. That's the generic name for Abilify, which is an antipsychotic medication. Pantoprazole is a proton pump inhibitor. The brand name is Protonix. It's for heartburn and GERD. Fluconazole is an antifungal medication. Its brand name is Diflucan. And ropinirole is a medication for Parkinson's disease and restless leg syndrome, a dopamine agonist, and its brand name is Requip. Number 102. The brand names of oxybutynin are A, Ditropan and OxyContin, B, Oxytrol and Depakote, C, Ditropan and Oxytrol, or D, Atarax and Leorcel. And the answer is C, Ditropan and Oxytrol. Those are both brand names of oxybutynin. Ditropan is an oral medication form, and Oxytrol is a patch. And those are medications, that's a medication for overactive bladder. Number 103. Nexium is a blank for GERD with a generic name of blank. A, H2 blocker, omeprazole. B, H2 blocker, esomeprazole. C, PPI, omeprazole. Or D, PPI, esomeprazole. And the answer is D. Nexium is a PPI for GERD with the generic name of esomeprazole. Omeprazole is also a PPI. Its brand name is Prilosec. Number 104. The generic name of Fosamax is A, alendronate, B, benzonatate, C, triamterene, or D, amitriptyline. And the answer is A, alendronate. That's the generic name of Fosamax, which is a medication for osteoporosis. Benzonatate is the generic name for Tessalon pearls, which is a medication for cough. Triamterene is the generic name for Direnium, which is a potassium-sparing diuretic. And amitriptyline is the generic name for Elavil, which is a tricyclic antidepressant. Number 105. Folic acid is a synthetic blank supplement. A. Vitamin D, B. Vitamin B12, C. Vitamin B9, or D. Calcium. The answer is C. Folic acid is a synthetic vitamin B9 supplement. It's also known as folate. Vitamin D2 is ergocalciferol. Vitamin B12 is cyanocobalamin. Number 106. Aristocort is a brand name of blank. A. Hydrocortisone, B. Triamcinolone, C. Prednisolone, or D. Prednisone. And the answer is B. Triamcinolone. That's Aristocort, and also Kenalog are brand names of triamcinolone that's applied topically to the skin. Hydrocortisone is the generic for cortisone, which is also a topical steroid product. And prednisolone is the generic for Prelone or Orapred. These are oral steroids given in a liquid form. And prednisone is the generic name for Deltazone, which is also a oral steroid. Number 107. Tiotropium is an anticholinergic bronchodilator for A. Chronic bronchitis, B. COPD, C. Emphysema, or D. All of the above. And the answer is D. All of the above. Tiotropium, its brand name is Spiriva. Number 108. Which of the following is or are in the same class as Armour thyroid? A. Sinemet, B. Cytomel, C. Synthroid, or D. Both B and C. And the answer is D. Both B and C. Both Cytomel and Synthroid are in the same class as Armour thyroid. These are all thyroid hormone medications. Cytomel is liothyronine, which is a synthetic T3 thyroid hormone. Synthroid is levothyroxine, which is a synthetic T4 thyroid hormone. And Sinemet, that's a medication for Parkinson's disease. It's a combination of carbidopa and levodopa. Number 109. Ciprofloxacin is a blank antibiotic. A. Cephalosporin, B. Fluoroquinolone, C. Macrolide, or D. Sulfonamide. The answer is B. Fluoroquinolone. Ciprofloxacin is a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. And you can have a hint there with the ending suffix of floxacin. That's how the fluoroquinolones end. And the brand name of ciprofloxacin is Cipro. Number 110. Isosorbide Mononitrate, brand name is Emdur, is a medication for A. High cholesterol, B. Constipation, C. Chest pain prevention, or D. Gout. The answer is C. Chest pain prevention. Isosorbide mononitrate, brand name Emdur, is a medication for chest pain prevention. Number 111. The generic name of Imitrex is A. Rizatriptan, B. Irbesartan, C. Sumatriptan, or D. Losartan. And the answer is C. Sumatriptan is the generic name for Imitrex. Rizatriptan is a generic for Maxalt, and both of those medications are 5-HT agonists for migraine headache, and you can see they both have the suffix triptan, which often indicates they're in that class. Irbesartan is the generic name for Avapro, and Losartan is the generic name for Cozar. Both of those are ARBs for high blood pressure, and they end with the suffix sartan, which indicates that they are of the ARB class. Number 112. The brand name of insulin Detamir, a long-acting insulin, is A. Levemir, B. Humalog, C. Lantus, or D. Basaglar. And the answer is A, Levemir. That's the brand name of insulin Detamir, which is a long-acting insulin. Humalog is the brand name of insulin Lispro, which is a rapid-acting insulin. Lantus and Basaglar are both brand names for insulin Glargine, which is also long-acting insulin. Number 113. Benzonatate is a medication for A, nausea, B, headache, C, cough, or D, cramps. The answer is C, cough. Benzonatate is a medication for cough, and the brand name is Tessalon Pearls. Number 114. The generic name for Pepcid is A, famotidine, B, pantoprazole, C, lansoprazole, or D, ranitidine. And the answer is A, famotidine. It's the generic name for Pepcid, which is an H2 blocker for heartburn. Pantoprazole is the generic name for Protonix. Lansoprazole is the generic name for Prevacid. Both of those are PPIs for heartburn and GERD. And ranitidine is the generic name for Zantac, which is a H2 blocker for heartburn also. Number 115. Valium is brand name of which benzodiazepine? A, alprazolam, B, diazepam, C, clonazepam, or D, timazepam. And the answer is B, diazepam is the generic name for Valium. Alprazolam is Xanax, clonazepam is Klonopin, and timazepam is Restoril. And those are all benzodiazepines. Xanax, Valium, and Klonopin are for anxiety, and Restoril is for sleep. Number 116. Ropinirole, brand name blank, is a dopamine agonist for Parkinson's disease and RLS. A, Requip, B, Sinemet, C, Ambien, or D, Robaxin. And the answer is A, Requip. Ropinirole, brand name is Requip. It's a dopamine agonist for Parkinson's disease and restless leg syndrome. Sinemet is a brand name for carbidopa and levodopa. It's also for Parkinson's disease. Ambien is the brand name for Zolpidem. That's a medication for sleep. And Robaxin, generic name is methocarbamol. That's a muscle relaxant. Number 117. Maxide and diazide contain A, hydrochlorothiazide, B, triamterene, C, furosemide, D, both A and B, which will be hydrochlorothiazide and triamterene, or E, both B and C, which would be triamterene and furosemide. And the answer is D, both A and B. Maxide and diazide contain hydrochlorothiazide and triamterene. Furosemide, it's the generic name for Lasix, which is also a diuretic for swelling. Number 118. The generic name of Lotensin is A, amlodipine, B, benazepril, C, ramipril, or D, amlodipine and benazepril. And the answer is B, benazepril. That's the generic name of Lotensin. Amlodipine is the generic name for Norvasc. Ramipril is the generic name for Altace. And amlodipine and benazepril, that's the generic for Lotrel. Number 119. The brand name of Flagyl is A, metoprolol, B, methocarbamol, C, metronidazole, or D, fluconazole. And the answer is C, metronidazole. That's the generic name for Flagyl, which is an antibiotic. Metoprolol is the generic name for Lopressor, which is a beta blocker for high blood pressure and irregular heartbeat. Methocarbamol is the generic name for Robaxin, which is a muscle relaxant. And fluconazole is the generic name for Diflucan, which is an antifungal. Number 120. Robaxin, or methocarbamol, is A, antibiotic, B, muscle relaxant, C, anxiolytic, or D, antifungal. And the answer is B, muscle relaxant. Robaxin or methocarbamol is a muscle relaxant. Number 121. True or false? Procardia is a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure and abnormal heart rhythms. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Procardia, which the generic name is nifedipine, is a dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker. It's for high blood pressure and not for heart rhythms. It is a calcium channel blocker, but just for high blood pressure. Number 122. The brand name of baclofen, a muscle relaxant, is A, Robaxin, B, Flexeril, C, Leoracel, or D, Bactroban. And the answer is C, Leoracel. It's the generic name for baclofen. Robaxin is the brand name for methocarbamol, which also is a muscle relaxant. Flexeril is the brand name for cyclobenzaprine, which is also a muscle relaxant. And Bactroban is the brand name for mupirocin, which is a topical antibiotic. Number 123. Methotrexate is a dihydrofolate reductase inhibitor used for A, certain types of cancer, B, diabetes, C, rheumatoid arthritis, or D, both A and C. And the answer is D, both A and C. Methotrexate it can be used for certain types of cancer and also for rheumatoid arthritis. Number 124. Which hormone do androgel and androderm contain? A, estrogen, B, testosterone, C, progesterone, or D, prolactin? And the answer is B, testosterone. And I have a note here, just a reminder, testosterone products are a DEA Schedule 3. So both androgel and androderm are DEA Schedule 3. Number 125. Ezetimibe is a medication for A, rheumatoid arthritis, B, high blood pressure, C, glaucoma, or D, high cholesterol. And the answer is D, high cholesterol. And the brand name of ezetimibe is Zetia. Number 126. Celecoxib is a selective COX-2 inhibitor blank for pain and inflammation. A, NSAID, B, steroid, C, ARB, or D, hormone. And the answer is A, NSAID. Celecoxib is a selective COX-2 inhibitor NSAID for pain and inflammation, and NSAID stands for non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Number 127. True or false? Guanfacine is a medication for chest congestion. A, true, or B, false? The answer is B, false. Guanfacine, brand name is 10X or Intuniv, is for high blood pressure or ADHD. Guaifenesin, brand name is Robitussin or Mucinex, is for chest congestion. Number 128. The generic name of Aricept, a medication for dementia, is A, memantine, B, donepezil, C, zolpidem, or D, meclizine? The answer is B, donepezil is the generic name for Aricept. Memantine is the generic name for Namenda, which is also a medication for dementia. Zolpidem is the generic name for Ambien, which is a medication for sleep. And meclizine is the generic name for Antivert, which is an antihistamine used for dizziness and motion sickness. Number 129. The brand name of hydroxychloroquine is A, Vistaril, B, Apresilene, C, Plaquenil, or D, Humira? And the answer is C, Plaquenil. That's the brand name for hydroxychloroquine. Vistaril is the brand name for hydroxyzine. Apresilene is the brand name for hydralazine, and Humira is the brand name for adalimumab. Number 130. True or false? The generic name for Cleocin is clindamycin. A, true, or B, false? The answer is A, true. The generic name for Cleocin is clindamycin. Number 131. The brand name of divalproex sodium is A, Depakote, B, Prometrium, C, Valium, or D, Trileptal. The answer is A, Depakote. It's the brand name for divalproex sodium, and it's a medication for seizures. Prometrium is the brand name for progesterone, which is a hormone. Valium is the brand name for diazepam, which is a benzodiazepine for anxiety. And Trileptal is the brand name for oxcarbazepine, which is a medication for seizures. 132. Products that contain morphine, such as Roxanol or MS-Contin, are DEA Schedule A, 2, B, 3, C, 4, or D, 5. And the answer is A. Products that contain morphine, such as Roxanol or MS-Contin, are a DEA Schedule 2. Remember, Schedule 2, there's the opioids and ADHD stimulants. Schedule 3 you can generally think of as testosterone, anabolic steroids, and medications not having greater than 90 milligrams of codeine per dose. Schedule 4, think of those as generally being anxiety and sleep medications, and Schedule 5, some medications for things like cough and diarrhea. Number 133. Estradiol with levonorgestrel is a blank combination drug. A, diuretic, B, diabetes, C, hormone, or D, antibiotic. And the answer is C, hormone. It's an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination. Number 134. Prelone is a brand name for A, prednisone, B, prednisolone, C, triamcinolone, or D, hydrocortisone. And the answer is B, prednisolone. Prelone is a brand name for prednisolone, and Orapred is also a brand name for prednisolone. Prednisone is a generic name for deltazone. Triamcinolone is a generic name for Kenalog or Aristocort, and hydrocortisone is a generic name for cortisone, and all of these are steroid products. Number 135. The generic name for Vasotac is A, Lysenapril, B, Enalapril, C, Benazepril, or D, Ramipril. And the answer is B, Enalapril. That's the generic name for Vasotac. Lysenapril is the generic name for Prenavil or Zestril. Benazepril is the generic name for Lotensin. And Ramipril is the generic name for Altase. And all of these medications are ACE inhibitors. They end with the suffix pril for high blood pressure. Number 136. The brand name of pioglitazone is blank. It's a drug for blank. A, Paxil, depression. B, Zofran, nausea. C, Actose, diabetes. Or D, Victoza, diabetes. The answer is C. The brand name for pioglitazone is Actose, and it's a drug for diabetes. Paxil is indeed a drug for depression. Its generic name is paroxetine. Zofran is a drug for nausea. Its generic name is ondansetron. And Victoza is a medication for diabetes also. Its generic name is liraglutide. Number 137. Cyanocobalamin is a blank supplement. A, vitamin C, B, vitamin B12, C, vitamin D2, or D, iron. And the answer is B, vitamin B12. Cyanocobalamin is a vitamin B12 supplement. Vitamin C is ascorbic acid. Vitamin D2 is ergocalciferol. And iron, it can also be known as ferrous sulfate or FeSO4. Number 138. The generic name of agestin is A, norethindrone, B, etonogestrel, C, estrogen, or D, testosterone. The answer is A, norethindrone. It's the generic name of agestin. It is a progesterone hormone. Etonogestrel, that's the progesterone part of NuvaRing. Estrogen, estradiol and ethinyl estradiol are the forms that are given in medication. And testosterone is in androgel or androderm. Number 139. The brand name of meclizine, a drug for motion sickness, is A. Alise, B. Antivert, C. Pamelor, or D. Atarax. And the answer is B. Antivert is a brand name for meclizine. Alise is a brand name for ethinyl estradiol with levonorgestrel. That's an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination. Pamelor is a brand name for nortriptyline, which is a tricyclic antidepressant. And Atarax is a brand name for hydroxyzine, which is an antihistamine that can be used in allergies or anxiety. Number 140. Valacyclovir is an blank. A. Antihistamine, B. Antibiotic, C. Antiviral, or D. Antifungal. And the answer is C. Antiviral. Valacyclovir is an antiviral. And many of the antivirals, they end with the suffix, you see ovir at the end, like virus. Number 141. The brand name for ipratropium with albuterol is A. Spiriva, B. Advair, C. Proventil, or D. Combivent. And the answer is D. Combivent. That is a brand name of ipratropium with albuterol. Spiriva is a brand name for tiotropium. Advair is a brand name for fluticasone with salmeterol. And Proventil is a brand name of albuterol. Number 142. The generic name of Cholase is A. Docusate, B. Polyethylene glycol, C. Celecoxib, or D. Famotidine. And the answer is A. Docusate. It's the generic name of Cholase, which is a stool softener for constipation. Polyethylene glycol is the generic name for Miralax, which is a laxative for constipation, or also used in GI procedure prep. Celecoxib, the brand name is Celebrex. That is a COX-2 selective NSAID for pain and inflammation. And famotidine, it's the brand name for Pepcid. That is an H2 blocker for heartburn. Number 143. True or false? Victoza is an injectable insulin for diabetes. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is B. False. Victoza, which is liraglutide, is an injectable GLP-1 analog for diabetes. So it's an injectable, but it's not an insulin. It's a GLP-1 analog. Number 144. Cortisone cream is a topical blank. A. Antihistamine, B. Steroid, C. Antibiotic, or D. Pain reliever. The answer is B. Steroid. Cortisone cream is a topical steroid. Its active ingredient is hydrocortisone. Number 145. True or false? Verapamil is a calcium channel blocker for high blood pressure and abnormal heart rhythms. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is A. True. Verapamil, which is Kaline or Verilin, is a non-dihydropyridine calcium channel blocker. So it's for high blood pressure and heart rhythms, both. Number 146. Ceftonir is the generic name for A. Keflex, B. Cleocin, C. Omnicef, or D. Cipro. And the answer is C. Omnicef. Ceftonir is the generic for Omnicef. Keflex is the brand name for cephalexin. Cleocin is the brand name for clindamycin, and Cipro is the brand name for ciprofloxacin. So those are all antibiotics. Number 147. The brand name of nortriptyline is A. Elavil, B. Pamelor, C. Deseril, or D. Remeron. And the answer is B, Pamelor. That's the brand name of nortriptyline, which is a tricyclic antidepressant. Elavil, the generic name is amitriptyline. That's also a tricyclic antidepressant. Deserel is the brand name for trazodone, which is an antidepressant. And Remeron is the brand name for mirtazapine, which is also an antidepressant. Number 148. Timolol, or Timoptic, is a or an blank eye drop for glaucoma. A, beta blocker, B, prostaglandin analog, C, alpha agonist, or D, none of the above. And the answer is A. Timolol, or Timoptic, is a beta blocker eye drop for glaucoma. And you can know that by the suffix, the olol suffix that you see in beta blockers. Number 149. Which of the following describe Trulicity? A. Generic name is sitagliptin. B. An injectable insulin product. C. It's for diabetes. D. It's an oral sulfonylurea. Or E. Both A and C. Its generic name is sitagliptin and it's for diabetes. And the answer is C. Trulicity in this list, it's only for diabetes. The generic name is dulaglutide. Sitagliptin is the generic name for Januvia. Trulicity is an injectable product, but it's not an injectable insulin product. It is not a oral sulfonylurea. It's actually a GLP-1 agonist. So it's only, on this list, it would only be for diabetes. Trulicity's generic name is dulaglutide. It's a GLP-1 agonist. It's an injectable drug for diabetes. Number 150. The brand name for promethazine is A. Adipex, B. Zofran, C. Anavert, or D. Phenergan. And the answer is D. Phenergan. That's the brand name for promethazine, which is a medication for nausea and vomiting. Adipex is the brand name for phentermine, which is a medication for weight loss. Zofran is the brand name for ondansetron, which is a medication for nausea. And Anavert is the brand name for meclizine, which is a medication for motion sickness. Number 151. The generic name for Zovirax is A. Valacyclovir, B. Ondansetron, C. Acyclovir, or D. Oseltamivir. And the answer is C. Acyclovir is the generic name for Zovirax. It's an antiviral. Valacyclovir is the generic name for Valtrex, which is also an antiviral. Ondansetron is the generic name for Zofran, which is a medication for nausea. And oseltamivir, his brand name is Tamiflu. That's also an antiviral. Number 152. Fluconazole, brand name blank, is an antifungal. A. Flagyl, B. Diflucan, C. Dristol, or D. Valtrex. The answer is B. Diflucan. Fluconazole, the brand name is Diflucan, is an antifungal. Flagyl, brand name is metronidazole, it's an antibiotic. Dristol, it's a vitamin D2 supplement. And Valtrex is valacyclovir, it's an antiviral. Number 153. Medrol is a or an blank. A. Antibiotic, B. Steroid, C. Anxiolytic, or D. Diuretic. And the answer is B. Medrol is a steroid. Its generic name is methylprednisolone. Number 154. The brand name of metformin with sitagliptin is A. Invokana, B. Januvia, C. Janumet, or D. Glucophage. And the answer is C. Janumet. That is metformin with sitagliptin. Invokana is canagliflozin, Januvia is sitagliptin, and Glucophage is metformin. So those are all medications for diabetes. Number 155. The generic name of Altace is A. Ramipril, B. Benazepril, C. Lysenapril, or D. Enalapril. And the answer is A. Ramipril is the generic name for Altace. Benazepril is Lotensin, Lysenapril is Prenavil or Zestril, and Enalapril is Vasotec. And you can tell by the pril suffix ending that these are all ACE inhibitors for high blood pressure. Number 156. The brand name of dexmethylphenidate is A. Adderall, B. Vyvanse, C. Focalin, or D. Ritalin. And the answer is C. Focalin. That's the brand name of dexmethylphenidate. Adderall is dextroamphetamine with amphetamine. Vyvanse is lisdexamphetamine, and Ritalin is methylphenidate. And these are all medications for ADHD, all DEA Schedule 2s. Number 157. Brimonidine is an alpha-2 agonist for A. High blood pressure, B. Glaucoma, C. Swelling, or D. Anxiety. And the answer is B. Glaucoma. Brimonidine is an alpha-2 agonist for glaucoma, and its brand name is Alphagan P. Number 158. True or false? The brand name for oxcarbazepine is Trileptal, and it's a medication for seizures. A. True, or B. False? And the answer is A. True. Oxcarbazepine is Trileptal, and it is a medication for seizures. Number 159. Risperidone, brand name Risperdal, is an blank medication. A. Antidepressant, B. Anxiolytic, C. Antibiotic, or D. Antipsychotic. And the answer is D. Antipsychotic. Risperidone, brand name Risperdal, is an antipsychotic medication. Number 160. Levaquin is a blank antibiotic. A. Penicillin, B. Macrolide, C. Fluoroquinolone, or D. Cephalosporin. The answer is C. Levaquin is a fluoroquinolone antibiotic. And the generic name is levofloxacin, so we know that it is a fluoroquinolone with the floxacin suffix. Number 161. The generic name of phthalate is A. HCTZ, B. furosemide, C. triamterene, or D. chlorthalidone. And the answer is D. chlorthalidone. It's the generic name of phthalatone. Hygrotin is another brand name for chlorthalidone as well. HCTZ is the generic name for microzide. Furosemide is the generic name for Lasix. And triamterene is the generic name for dirinium. And these are all diuretics. Number 162. Atomoxetine is the generic name for A. Xalaprim, B. Strattera, C. Ambien, or D. Vyvanse. And the answer is B. Strattera. Atomoxetine is the generic name for Strattera. And I have a note here that this is one of the non-controlled medications for ADHD. Number 163. Polyethylene glycol is a drug for A. Constipation, B. Diarrhea, C. Allergies, or D. High cholesterol. And the answer is A. Constipation. Polyethylene glycol is for constipation. And it's also used for GI procedure preps, and its brand name is Miralax. Number 164. Caltrate is a supplement that contains calcium and blank. A. Magnesium, B. Vitamin B, C. Vitamin D, or D. Iron. And the answer is C. It's vitamin D, actually vitamin D3. It's cholecalciferol. Remember, vitamin B9 is folic acid, and iron is ferrous sulfate. Number 165. Bactroban is a topical antibiotic with a generic name of blank. A. Methylphenidate. B. Metronidazole. C. Sulfamethoxazole. Or D. Mupirocin. And the answer is D. Mupirocin. Bactroban is a topical antibiotic with a generic name of Mupirocin. Methylphenidate is the generic name for Ritalin, which is a medication for ADHD. Metronidazole is the generic name for Flagyl, which is an antibiotic. Sulfamethoxazole, that's a generic name that's part of Bactrim, which is an antibiotic. Number 166. The brand name of ethinyl estradiol and etonogestrel is A. Orthotricycline, B. Ovcon, C. Nuvaring, or D. Yasmin. And the answer is C. Nuvaring. Nuvaring is an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination that contains estradiol and etonogestrel. Orthotricycline has ethinyl estradiol and norgestimate. Ovcon is ethinyl estradiol and norethindrone. And Yasmin is ethinyl estradiol and drospirenone. Number 167, true or false? The brand name of ethinyl estradiol and drospirenone is Yaz or Yasmin. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is A, true. Number 168. Phentermine, brand name Adipex, is a DEA schedule blank for blank. A is Schedule 2 for weight loss. B, Schedule 2 for ADHD. C, Schedule 4 for weight loss. And D is Schedule 4 for ADHD. And the answer is C. Phentermine, brand name Adipex, is a DEA Schedule 4 for weight loss. Number 169. The brand name of levodopa-carbidopa is A. Sinemet, B. Septra, C. Seroquel, or D. Requip. And the answer is A. Sinemet. That is the brand name for levodopa-carbidopa, which is a medication used in Parkinson's disease. Septra is the brand name for sulfamethoxazole or trimethoprim, another brand name like Bactrim. And Seroquel is the brand name for quetiapine, which is an antipsychotic. And Requip is the brand name of ropinirole, which is a dopamine agonist for Parkinson's disease and restless leg syndrome. Number 170. The brand name of omega-3 acid ethyl esters is A. Zetia, B. Mevacor, C. Lovaza, or D. Lipitor. And the answer is C. Lovaza. That's the brand name of omega-3 acid ethyl esters. Zetia is the brand name of ezetimibe. Mevacor is a brand name for lovastatin. And Lipitor is a brand name for Atorvastatin. And these are all medications for cholesterol. Number 171. Desogen contains A. Ethinyl estradiol, B. Drospirenone, C. Desogestrel, D. Both A and B, or E. Both A and C. And the answer is E. Both A and C. Desogen is an estrogen-progesterone hormone combination with ethinyl estradiol and desogestrel. Number 172. The generic name of Robitussin and Mucinex is A. Guanfacine, B. Guaifenesin, C. Diphenhydramine, or D. Loratadine. And the answer is B. Guaifenesin. That's the generic for Robitussin and Mucinex. Guanfacine is the generic for Tenex and Intuniv, whereas for high blood pressure and ADHD. Diphenhydramine is a generic name for Benadryl, which is an antihistamine for allergies. And Loratadine is a generic name for Claritin, which is an antihistamine for allergies. Number 173. Rizatriptan is a medication for A. Depression, B. Vomiting, C. Migraine, or D, diabetes? And the answer is C, migraine. Rizatriptan is a medication for migraine. Its brand name is Maxalt. Number 174. Avapro, generic name blank, is a or an blank for hypertension. A, irbesartan, ARB. B, irbesartan, ACE inhibitor. C, enalapril, ARB. Or D, enalapril, ACE inhibitor. And the answer is A. Avapro, generic name irbesartan, is an ARB for hypertension. Number 175. Prometrium is a blank hormone. A, estrogen, B, thyroid, C, testosterone, or D, progesterone. And the answer is D, progesterone. Prometrium is a progesterone hormone. Number 176. The brand name of doxazosin is A, Hytrin, B, Cardura, C, Flomax, or D, Diovan. And the answer is B, Cardura. The brand name of doxazosin is Cardura. Hytrin is the brand name of terazosin. Flomax is the brand name of tamsulosin. And Diovan is the brand name of valsartan. And Hytrin, Cardura, and Flomax are all alpha blockers, and those end with the suffix osin. And Diovan, ending with the suffix sartan, is an ARB for high blood pressure. Number 177. Tradjenta, or linagliptin, is a medication for A, high blood pressure, B, diabetes, C, allergies, or D, gout. And the answer is B, diabetes. Tradjenta, or linagliptin, is a medication for diabetes. It's in the class known as gliptins, and they are DPP4 inhibitors. Number 178. The generic name for Humira is A, allopurinol, B, hydroxychloroquine, C, adalimumab, or D, insulin lispro. And the answer is C, adalimumab. That's the generic name for Humira. Allopurinol is the generic name for Zaloprim. Hydroxychloroquine is the generic name for Plaquenil, and insulin lispro is the generic name for Humalog. Number 179. True or false? Macrobid and macrodantin have the same generic name. A, true, or B, false? The answer is A, true. Both macrobid and macrodantin are forms of nitrofurantoin. Number 180. Pulmicort is a or an blank for asthma and COPD. A, beta bronchodilator, B, steroid, C, bronchodilator and steroid, or D, anticholinergic bronchodilator. And the answer is B. Pulmicort is a steroid for asthma and COPD. Its generic name is budesonide. Number 181. The brand name of amlodipine with benazepril is A, Lotensin, B, Lotrel, C, Maxide, or D, Advair. The answer is B, Lotrel. It's a combination of amlodipine and benazepril. Lotensin is just benazepril. Maxide is triamterene with HCTZ, and Advair is fluticasone with salmeterol. Number 182. Diovan HCT is blank and hydrochlorothiazide. A, losartan, B, valsartan, C, irbesartan, or D, donepezil. And the answer is B, valsartan. Diovan HCT is valsartan and hydrochlorothiazide. Number 183. Blank is a cardiac glycoside for heart failure and irregular heartbeat. A, linoxin, B, aldactone, C, Lasix, or D, tenormin. The answer is A, Lanoxin. The generic name is digoxin. Aldactone is spironolactone, and that's a potassium-sparing diuretic. Lasix is furosemide, which is a diuretic. And tenormin is a tenolol, which is a beta blocker. Number 184, true or false? Fioricet is a combination of aspirin, butalbital, and caffeine for tension headache. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is B, false. Fioricet, it's a combination of acetaminophen, butalbital, and caffeine, not aspirin. That's a product called Fiorinol. Fioricet, you can remember that because it ends in CET, set, and that's also in acetaminophen, which is Tylenol. Number 185. The brand name of insulin degludec is A, Lantus, B, Levemir, C, Tresiba, or D, Novolog. And the answer is C, Tresiba. That's insulin degludec. Lantus is insulin glargine, Levemir is insulin detamir, and Novolog is insulin aspart. Number 186. Ketoconazole is the generic name for A, diflucan, B, Nizoral, C, Flagyl, or D, Zovirax. And the answer is B, Nizoral. That's the brand name of ketoconazole. Diflucan is a brand name for fluconazole, and both of those are antifungals. Flagyl is a brand name for metronidazole, which is an antibiotic, and Zovirax is a brand name for acyclovir, which is an antiviral. Number 187. Nitrostat is the brand name of blank for chest pain. A, Isosorbide Mononitrate, B, Hydralazine, C, nitrofurantoin, or D, nitroglycerin. And the answer is D, nitroglycerin. It's the generic name for Nitrostat. It's for chest pain. Isosorbide mononitrate, its brand name is Imdur. It's also for chest pain prevention. Hydralazine, the brand name is Apresyline. It's a vasodilator for high blood pressure. And nitrofurantoin is Macrobid, which is an antibiotic. Number 188. The generic name of Restoril is A, diazepam, B, temazepam, C, clonazepam, or D, zolpidem. And the answer is B, temazepam. That's the generic name of Restoril. It's a benzodiazepine for sleep. Diazepam is Valium, clonazepam is Klonopin, and those are both benzodiazepines for anxiety. And zolpidem is Ambien. It's a medication for sleep. Number 189. Amiodarone is a medication for A, irregular heartbeat, B, high blood pressure, C, sleep, or D, asthma. And the answer is A. Amiodarone is a medication for irregular heartbeat. And the brand names of amiodarone are Cordarone or Pacerone. Number 190. The generic name of Namenda is A, quetiapine, B, donepezil, C, memantine, or D, sertraline. And the answer is C, memantine. And that's the generic name for Namenda. Quetiapine is the generic name for Seroquel. Donepezil is a generic name for Aricept. And sertraline is the generic name for Zoloft. Number 191. The brand name of canagliflozin is A, Trulicity, B, Invokana, C, Actos, or D, Januvia. And the answer is B, Invokana. That's the brand name of canagliflozin. Trulicity is the brand name for dulaglutide. Actos is a brand name for pioglitazone. And Januvia is the brand name for sitagliptin. Number 192. What is the generic name of Toradol? A, Ketorolac, B, Meloxicam, C, Celecoxib, or D, Naproxen. The answer is A, ketorolac. That's the generic name for Toradol. Meloxicam is Mobic. Celecoxib is Celebrex. And naproxen is naproxen or anaprox. And these are all NSAIDs for pain and inflammation. Number 193. Cytomel, which is liothyronine, is a medication for A, gout, B, rheumatoid arthritis, C, thyroid, or D, heartburn. And the answer is C, thyroid. Liothyronine is a synthetic T3 thyroid hormone. Number 194. Escalith is a mood stabilizer for bipolar disorder containing A, calcium, B, lithium, C, aluminum, or D, magnesium. And the answer is B, lithium. Lithobid is also another brand name of lithium, in addition to Escalith. Number 195. The generic name for Bentyl is A, diphenhydramine, B, famotidine, C, dicyclamine, or D, meclizine. And the answer is C, dicyclamine is the generic name for Bentyl. This is a medication for cramping. Diphenhydramine is the generic name for Benadryl, which is an antihistamine. Famotidine is the generic name for Pepcid, which is an H2 blocker for heartburn. And meclizine is the generic name for Anavert, which is an antihistamine for dizziness and motion sickness. Number 196. The brand name of pramipexole is A, Mirapex, B, Miralax, C, Remeron, or D, Requip. And the answer is A. Mirapex is the brand name of pramipexole. Miralax is the brand name for polyethylene glycol. Remeron is the brand name for mirtazapine, and Requip is the brand name for ropinirole. Number 197. What is the brand name of Nebivolol? A, Inderal, B, Lopressor, C, Tenormin, or D, Bistolic. And the answer is D, Bistolic. That's the brand name of Nebivolol. Inderal is the brand name for propranolol. Lopressor is a brand name for metoprolol. And Tenormin is a brand name for atenolol. And these are all beta blockers because they have the olol suffix. Number 198. True or false? Terazosin is an alpha blocker for high blood pressure and enlarged prostate symptoms. A, true, or B, false? And the answer is A, true. Terazosin is an alpha blocker for high blood pressure and enlarged prostate symptoms. Number 199. Magox is a or an A, appetite suppressant, B, magnesium supplement, C, antifungal, or D, antipsychotic. And the answer is B. Magox is a magnesium supplement. Number 200. The brand name of colchicine, a medication for gout, is A, Colace, B, Xanaflex, C, Colchris, or D, Zaloprim. And the answer is C, Colchris. That's a brand name for colchicine. Colace is a brand name for Docusate, which is a stool softener. Xanaflex is a brand name for tizanidine, which is a muscle relaxant. And Zaloprim is a brand name for allopurinol, which is also another medication for gout. Thanks for watching. Please like and share this video with others who may find it helpful, and please subscribe to see more of my drug information videos. Thank you.